This is apropos. Well, the White House has been pushing back against mounting criticism that the US president hasn't done enough to explain why it was necessary to start a war with Iran or to articulate his vision for an endgame to the escalating conflict. As energy prices surge and the death toll rises in a war the administration suggests may only be in the opening stages, the frustration is coming not just from the political left, but also from Donald Trump's MAGA base. Simon Moritz has more.
The option is on the table and making headlines. U.S. President Donald Trump won't rule out sending U.S. troops into Iran if necessary and is planning for a protracted war.
Right from the beginning, we projected 4 to 5 weeks, but we have capability to go far longer than that. We'll do it. Whatever somebody said today, they said, oh, well, if the president wants to do it really quickly. After that, he'll get bored. I don't get bored. And thank everybody.
But the deaths of U.S. soldiers and footage of fighter jets in free fall are drawing a lot of attention, even inside the MAGA movement. These longtime Trump supporters sound off on the right-wing broadcast channel, Real America's Voice. Some stand behind their president.
We would have a nuclear holocaust throughout the Middle East. This government is trying to stop, and I just don't see how anyone could be against that.
Others aren't so supportive.
I'm not happy about the whole thing. I don't think this was in America's interest.
He was the no more endless wars candidate in 2016 and 2024, particularly, and this looks like an open betrayal of the base.
Indeed, Trump often said he would end wars during his presidential campaign.
He will start a war. I'm not going to start a war. I'm going to stop wars.
When interviewed, some Trump voters questioned the war.
Thousands of American lives lost. It's that MAGA has become MIGA. Make Israel great again.
I had friends of mine that I lost while I served over there. I don't want anybody to have to go through that again. I don't want my son to have to possibly go through that.
Parallels with the long Iraq War, which killed almost 4,500 U.S. soldiers and over 100,000 civilians, are all too present. In a press conference, the U.S. Defense Secretary tried to offer reassurance.
This is not Iraq. This is not endless. Our generation knows better, and so does this president.
Just before its start, only 27% of Americans supported intervention in Iran. With just 8 months before the midterm elections, President Trump has made a risky political bet.
Well, for more, we're joined now by Stephen Zunes, politics professor and program director for Middle Eastern Studies at the University of San Francisco. Thanks so much for being with us on the programme this evening, Professor. So Donald Trump again insisting today that people are very happy about the situation in Iran. The polls suggest that's not exactly true. It depends on which opinion survey you look at, but it seems that a majority of Americans don't believe that Trump made the right decision here in launching this campaign. What's your feeling about how people in the US view this campaign?
This is almost unprecedented. Even in the most controversial wars, like Iraq, when the war initiates, people tend to rally around the flag and support our troops, that kind of thing. And initially, the support is pretty strong, and then declines over time, particularly if the U.S. gets bogged down and the body bags come back and it looks like there's no end in sight. However, this is remarkable that at the very beginning of the war, there is overwhelming opposition, not just from liberals and the left, but as your reporter noted, from much of Trump's base as well.
And privately, what do you think Republican allies are saying about the potential risks here to the US? We know and we've heard what they've been saying publicly, but behind the scenes, do you think there's a lot of pressure being applied to Donald Trump here?
Well, already Republicans are getting pretty nervous about the midterms due to the corruption, the stagnant economy, the political repression that we've seen through ICE raids and the like. And so this is a big risk, especially since it was the white working class voters who are traditionally voted Democratic who shifted to Trump when Hillary Clinton got the nomination, largely because she had the reputation of being a hawk. And Trump kept pounding on the theme that Hillary supported the invasion of of Iraq, continuing war in Afghanistan, war in Libya, et cetera, et cetera. I'll bring the troops home, America first, and all that. So this is a critical voting bloc, which Trump may be losing.
And Stephen, do you think that Trump did enough to prepare the American people and his own supporters for these strikes on Iran in advance? Or were most people kind of taken by surprise by what happened over the weekend?
Well, I can't help but compare with President George W. Bush and his State of the Union address just prior to the invasion of Iraq. He spent almost half his speech trying to justify it. I mean, granted that most of his claims ended up being proved false, but at least he took the time and effort to try to convince Congress and the American people that this was the right thing to do. By contrast, Trump, who in his 1 hour and 48 minutes of his State of the Union, only 3 minutes involved Iran, and they're pretty vague. So it's like he doesn't even seem to even care what Congress or the American public thinks.
And what kind of impact then will the return of Congress have on the debate overall in the US, do you think?
Well, I think, often, one of the controversies of the Democratic Party right now has been for years that the party leadership has tended to be more hawkish than the grassroots. They were tended to be part of the minority of the party that supported the Iraq invasion. They've been very hardline support of Israel and its wars. But they're getting a lot of pressure right now to say, hey, you got to stand up to this. This is wrong, if not because of the war itself, at least on constitutional grounds, because this is a clear violation of Article 1 of the Constitution. I mean, for an offensive war like this, you have to get permission of Congress. I mean, it's not ambivalent. That was reinforced in the 1973 War Powers Resolution, and his ignoring this, like his ignoring a lot of other traditional constraints around presidential power regarding the budget and tariffs and a number of other things, I think will definitely lead Democrats to be a little more bolder than they've perhaps been willing to do before on foreign affairs.
Yeah, because Trump has now ordered strikes on 7 foreign nations. Can Donald Trump now expect the Democrats to receive perhaps a boost in the polls as they are going to be painting a picture of a president who's more concerned about what's happening overseas than the domestic concerns of voters in the US?
They'd certainly be smart if they did so, because again, that's the line that Trump used against the Democrats when he was running. And I think, especially since this is not going to end soon, that there will be increasing casualties of Americans and large numbers of Iranian civilians, but also the fact that the Strait of Hormuz is closed at this point, where 20% of the oil comes, and the impact at gas prices at the pump, as well as simply that whenever you have a big rise in petroleum prices, it can affect the economy as a whole, and we could see the risk of even a global recession. So, on economic grounds alone, this could hurt the incumbent president, and something that the Democrats might want to take advantage of.
And what do Donald Trump supporters make of the role that Israel is playing here? The US president again denying a little earlier that Israel forced him to attack Tehran, saying actually it was the other way around. We saw in the report earlier supporters starting to talk about make Israel great again rather than make America great again. So how is all of that playing out in the MAGA base?
Well, parts of the MAGA base are these right-wing Christian fundamentalists who subscribe to this millennialist theology that Israel's the modern day version of the Israelite kingdom. God is on their side, and even some have gone as far as talking about this war as the first phase of the conflict that'll lead to Armageddon and the return of Christ and 1,000-year reign and that kind of thing. So you have that kind of group that is really gung ho in supporting Israel, and you do have sort of the right wing Zionists among the neoconservative intellectuals and those folks. But I think a lot of people in the base are a little skeptical of that and thinking, if this is for Israel, why are we making all these sacrifices? Now, I'm a little nervous. I don't want people to fall into these kind of anti-Semitic conspiracy theories that, the wealthy Jews behind the scenes are forcing Trump to do things against his will. I mean, that's obviously not true. But at the same time, I think there will be some growing skepticism and questions about the role of Israel and how that might have impacted U.S. decision making.
And Stephen, some observers also pointing out that the war, it's also posing a risk for future Republican leaders, complicating what has been really an America First ideology. So might that ideology evolve, and in what direction? It's really been at the core of the MAGA movement itself, hasn't it?
Yes, it has, though I should mention that the majority of Republicans in Congress predate the Trump phenomenon, and they were much more traditional hawks. And many of them, I'm sure, are pleased that Trump has done this kind of reversal. But of course, they're also going to have to consider, along with quite a few other issues, whether following in lockstep with Trump is going to negatively impact their political future. And of course, we've seen the great flip-flopping. I mean, we have J.D. Vance, as a senator, wrote an op-ed in the Wall Street Journal 4 years ago saying he's voting for Trump because he's the peace candidate. He won't get us in any of these foreign wars and that kind of thing. And so it's been quite entertaining in certain ways to see him turn around to become this big super interventionist hawk now that he's vice president.
And how does Trump's approach then differ to previous presidents? You mentioned some of them a little earlier, who've been much more reluctant to engage in foreign intervention scenarios unless the United States is actually provoked or directly attacked.
I think the striking thing about this war is that there's a broad consensus among the national security establishment. I mean, these are the professional people who study these kinds of things. These are the top admirals and generals. These are the people in the intelligence community that have long said a war with Iran would not be good. That the cost-benefit analysis did not turn out right. As terrible as the regime was, and as negative as their impact has been on the region in terms of supporting extremist groups, and prior to that, the Assad regime in Syria, that Iran's retaliatory capability was strong enough that even though obviously the United States would get the upper hand overall, it would still do a whole lot of damage in a number of ways, and this is exactly what we're seeing. So I think the fact that the opposition to this war is not just coming from people who have concerns about human rights, international law, civilian casualties, or for that matter, the Constitution, but those just on a very pragmatic level, see this as not strengthening American security, not bringing greater stability to the region, but in fact doing just the opposite.
Stephen, thanks so much for being with us on the programme. That is Stephen Zunes, politics professor and programme director for Middle Eastern Studies at the University of San Francisco. We do appreciate your time.